The 2020 Minority Health Film Festival offers a diverse variety of films and events that we just wouldn't be able to offer in the in-person cinema experience. But I think what really makes it unique is the focus not only on public health issues, but the issues that really concern communities of color. If you're looking for a reason to engage or to try it out, this is the perfect time. Just go to mkefilm.org/MHFF.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us, and welcome to Day 4 of the Minority Health Film Festival, sponsored by Froedtert and the Medical College of Wisconsin. My name is Aster Gilbert, and I am the Genre Queer Program Coordinator at Milwaukee Film and one of the programmers for the Minority Health Film Festival. We'd also like to recognize the Queer Curatorial Fund from the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee's Department of Film, Video, Animation, and New Genres, who is a sponsor for this panel, as well as the film related to it, A Normal Girl. The film A Normal Girl is playing in a program called Mind, Body, and Soul, which is featuring 6 incredible short films, and I strongly encourage you to check it out. And now I'm going to hand it over to our moderator, Dr. Carrie Costello, who will start the panel and introduce our amazing panelists. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. I'm Carrie Gabriel Costello. My pronouns are Zer Zim, or he, his, him, and I am a sociology professor at UWM, where I also direct the LGBTQ+ studies program. I'm also an intersex person and intersex advocate who studies these things academically, but also is involved on a personal level. And I'd like to turn it on over to my the rest of the other panelists to introduce themselves as well. Shawnee, you want to start since you came in?
Okay, sure. Yes, my name is Shauna Lipton, and my pronouns are she, her, or they, them. I have a PhD from University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee in literature and cultural theory, and Dr. Costello was actually on my dissertation committee. And I am the producer of A Normal Girl film.
My name is Shawn Seiferwall. I am the co-founder of the Intersex Justice Project, and it's a grassroots project for, by and for intersex people of color, whose mission is to end intersex surgery in the United States. And yeah. And my pronouns are he, him, and his. And I'm intersex.
Hey, thank you, Seifa. Okay, so I was not aware until just a couple of hours before this that I was going to be moderating, but I will happily do that. I do want to say that if there are people who are watching who have questions that they'd like to present to Shauna or to Seifa or to me, that you can let us know that in whichever stream you're watching, and we'll try to add those questions as well as attend the ones that I will attempt to present first. So I'm just going to start with a question for Shauna, just asking, what is it that inspired you to want to produce A Normal Girl?
Yes, so I mean, I think as somebody in gender and sexuality studies, I had learned about intersex in an academic context, but it wasn't until I saw Pigeon Pagonis give a talk that I saw someone who was really coming at it from an activist perspective and from a queer intersectional perspective. And I saw Pigeon give a talk and show a short film that they had made, but there were a variety of issues with the film that they made where it was primarily auditory, and it used a lot of copyrighted images and animation and copyrighted music. So basically, I wanted to help them as somebody, because I teach at an art college and happen to know people who do original animation. So we connected with an animator and a composer to do original music. So to give them a tool that could go further, on the festival, another thing to make the rounds on the festival circuit. But as an educator, I was really thinking about something that could be used in classrooms and as an educational tool, and to get wider distribution for them. And so I was really just trying to amplify that message and to connect them with resources, because I felt really strongly about their mission and what they're trying to do, and what the Intersex Justice Project is trying to do around ending intersex surgeries.
Okay, thank you. Seifa, can I follow up a similar question with you? What did you hope that an audience would glean from watching the film, A Normal Girl?
I mean, I think, lately I've just been thinking a lot about, especially in light of the recent Lori win. So the Intersex Justice Project has, the End Intersex Surgery campaign. The sort of biggest target was Lurie Children's Hospital in Chicago. And I think there's something, in the aftermath of that sort of victory, and I put it in quotes, we talked to different reporters, and one reporter was just like, what has the toll been? What is the emotional cost of doing this work? And I think that was probably the most profound question that I've entertained in all my years of, giving interviews. And I think the reason why it sits with me so heavy is it's like, there is an emotional toll. There is an emotional cost, And I think we as an audience can sit back and look at this film and be like, oh, wow, this is, this person, and they have this story, and it's so intense and it's so tragic, but yet they're fighting back and blah, 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 and I think, we want to celebrate this hero, and I think there's also a cost to that public activism, right? And it's a generous service, it's a generous offering that intersex people give when they tell their stories over and over and over again, right? And I think it's just like, how can we as allies, as friends, and as family support intersex people to tell their stories in an embodied way, but also to take up the fight when intersex people burn out, and because I think a lot of people who I started doing this work with, a lot of people, some people are doing different things. And I feel like intersex people are entitled to do that work, entitled to just live their lives and just be, and not necessarily have to represent or be intersex. But I think, I think we, in watching films like this, especially given that it's kind of like a documentary about someone's real life, I think we should get really curious about what does it mean to undertake this kind of activism.
Okay, you brought up so many interesting things that I want to be able to have us follow up on, but I'll go first to Shauna turn and ask, so Shauna, what were your concerns about the representation of intersex experience as somebody coming in to do this project to be an ally?
Absolutely. And I will say this has been, an imperfect process. And I think one thing that really struck me, like Seifa was saying, like a lot of the work of intersex activism, and we worked pretty closely with Linnell Stephanie Long, who has been doing this, for decades, and who told her story a lot in mainstream media and on talk shows, and Pigeon and Seifa, all telling their story over and over and over again, and giving, talks for audiences and being on panels and such, and just the fatigue that happens and the way that a film can allow the story to travel without the person having to tell the story over and over. And one thing that struck me with Pigeon versus Linnell is that Pigeon had access to social media and YouTube and ways to frame the story in their own way and in their own complex way without having to go through that, filter of the mainstream media. And I think one thing that's difficult with films, like we originally intended to make a documentary feature film. We were still hoping to do that, but film is just a very expensive medium and also a very collaborative medium. So I think we did also realize how, even within making a film, how difficult it is to get out the story that you want to tell in the way that you want to tell it. And we strove to try to like make relationships and to give, Pigeon was a producer on the film, and to have them involved in every aspect of the film, and to only have intersex. This is one of the reasons why we reached out to you. We didn't want anybody in the film as an expert who wasn't intersex themselves. But I also wouldn't say that it's like, that having Aubrey and I involved, who are allies, who are not intersex ourselves, doesn't also influence the production and the gaze on the film. So I think, we just tried to forge those relationships and be in dialogue, and also to, to recognize that, that the people involved do have an impact on the questions that are being asked and the way it's being framed and all of that.
Well, and it's also a project attempting to communicate with people who are not intersex, and that is good to have the involvement of people who are endosex and intersex in a project where you're trying to communicate between communities. I just want to make sure that I did not seem to be coming across as attacking in any way.
No, but I'm saying, there are ethical concerns with that. And I would say, as somebody who teaches gender studies, I was trying to create something that could be sort of like a 101 or an introduction, but also to do it in a way that isn't reductive or oversimplified, like that you're trying to have a tool that can connect with people, and, people can become aware of something maybe that they haven't been aware of before, but to also not just have it from, an invasive gaze or something like that, right? Like, so, I think that's always a concern and a process.
Well, let me ask Seifa then, because no short film could ever convey everything there is to convey about intersex experience. Mm-hmm. How well do you feel that the film, represents your experience in the world? Or if there was something that you were going to add, perhaps, what would that be?
Yeah, I mean, I had this conversation with the filmmakers, I think sometimes, like, what often happens, how origin stories are told. They're told in a context of like power and privilege, right? And I think sometimes, and I've had this very clear conversation with Pigeon. I've had this conversation with Shawn and Aubrey. But even when me and Pigeon have been in interviews together, the way my words get represented are very different from the way their words are represented. And if people ask, like, in, past interviews, like, people would ask Pigeon, and Pigeon was like, well, I want to bring on Seifa, but the gaze would still be on Pigeon, right? And so I think one thing that I've shared is just like, because we live in the United States, because we live in this time of like very heightened and violent white supremacy, it's kind of like this weird thing that happens, right? Where it's just like, oh, Black Lives Matter, and Black people are erased, systemically erased from narratives, right? And I think I shouldn't have to be like, oh, I am the co-founder of the Intersex Justice Project. But I think especially after the Lori win, it was very easy for my work to be erased, right? Because I think people, and there's no shade to Pigeon. Like, I think Pigeon has really worked hard for what they have received. I've literally seen them bust their ass for real. And I think because of just, Pigeon being like a white POC person, like, people are definitely wanting to lift up more of that experience and more of that narrative at the expense of like Black people and the expense of Black labor that happens, you know? And so I think for me, my critique that I share with Shawn and Aubrey is just like, you know, I think, again, like, you know, I really respect the work that Pigeon has done. Like, I think them putting their story out there so vulnerably for so long, like, I think it deserves a kind of merit that, like, you know, that is like unsurpassed, you know? And it's just like, when people know the story, the origin story of IJP, it's not just Pigeon, right? Like, and I think you know, for me, I was just very clear that like, I don't want to be erased in that work, and I don't want my labor to be erased in that work either. And in the representation, even in the short segment, you know?
Yeah. And to follow up with that, like I would say, you know, we showed the demonstrations taking place at Lori, which were, you know, staged by IJP, that were a collaborative effort. And, you know, that is the thing that I feel like is improperly represented in the film, is just how much that is a collaborative effort. Although this film is about more focusing on Pigeon and their story. But yeah, I think the work that Seifa does as well to connect the intersex medical violence to the history of medical violence against people of color, and is such important work. And even in the statements they made at that protest, the speech that they gave that we didn't show this in full, but it's an incredibly powerfully moving speech where Seifa harkens back to J. Marion Sims and the history of gynecology and experiments on Black people, and that there is this legacy of medical violence, and that it's an important thing to connect to. And I think it connects to a lot of work by other scholars, like in Black on Both Sides, C. Riley Snorton, talking about those interconnected trans and intersex histories with medical violence against Black people very specifically.
Actually, it occurs to me that we have been talking a fair bit about what happened at Lori. And for our audience that has only seen the short film, as a background, Seifa, maybe you could give us a sort of succinct overview of what people were doing and what the outcome was and what it was like to be involved with that.
Yeah, I mean, I think the End Intersex Surgery campaign lasted for 3 years. It's still ongoing because even though Lurie Children's Hospital, which is a very powerful hospital in Chicago, you know, they own Chicago, you know, I think it was to get them to issue a public apology, for them to say that they would stop doing surgeries at their facility for 6 months. I think it was a valiant effort. And the reason why, you know, I think IJP was a meeting of the minds between me and Pigeon. You know, Pigeon is steeped in the social justice community in Chicago, has been doing social justice activism for a long time. And they love their city. They go hard for their city, you know, and I think it made Chicago a great place to start because we would have the support of activists, right? And I think IJP was committed to building across movements, right? To build with people who were doing like anti-prison work, people who were doing gender justice work, people who were doing racial justice work. You know, those are the people who were showing up to support us at protests, you know? And we chose Lurie because Pigeon was harmed there as a child, right? And you know, it kind of goes back to what I was saying earlier around the emotional cost. Like I can't imagine what it must be like to be in the same city, like protesting against the hospital that harmed you. You know, like me, like so many queers, I moved around. You know, I was harmed at Columbia Presbyterian Hospital in New York City. I live in Atlanta, Georgia. You know, so I can only imagine what it must be like to be in the same city as your perpetrators, you know? And so, yeah, I do think, yeah, I mean, if you would have told me 6 months ago that this would be the case, that we could actually temporarily celebrate this victory, I would have told you were a damn lie. because Lori was just so adamant about their position. But I think when it was not only the attack on their public image, because I think people had been tweeting, reposting, adding them for like years. I think it was just like the threat to their money, and I think that was ultimately what pushed them for this concession, because they wouldn't have made that concession otherwise, and so hopefully other hospitals, other states, other people can really take up the mantle to really fight for intersex justice, because like I said on the call earlier, intersex justice requires for people who are not intersex to recognize that their liberation is intertwined with intersex people.
And something I will say too is a lot of these clinics that are, working with children and working with intersex children are branding themselves as really friendly to trans children. And that was part of what helped to escalate this, was pointing out the hypocrisy. And I know that this is happening also at OHSU in Portland, where I live. Their gender health clinic is very pro-trans and very progressive on that, but still performing surgeries on intersex children and infants. So, that they're really trying to like play both sides in that way.
Yeah.
Let me just interject for like the audience to just a sort of 101 level thing, but to think about is that many of the interventions that trans people seek out to actualize themselves are the same procedures that get imposed without consent on young intersex people, and that the very same surgery can be something that liberates somebody or destroys somebody. But the group that profits in either case is going to be the medical profession that provides that service. And that helps explain why this bizarre juxtaposition happens again and again. Mm-hmm. And why it can be that really well-intentioned endosex, that's not intersex, trans people may not understand how advocacy that they are participating in is not proving helpful to intersex folks who you would think would be natural allies. So just wanted to sort of lay that out for our audience.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, hey! So we've been talking about this whole thing, and it's a movie about Pidge, and we should say something about them. And so I don't know, Seifa, what was it like working with Pigeon on this Lori project that did have this success?
Yeah, I feel like I have a lot of respect for Pigeon. Like I've shared, I think it was a very generous offering, that intersex activists engage in this work, to share their stories. I think Pigeon is very creative. I think Pigeon is very dynamic. I think we also have very strong personalities. We definitely got into it at times. And, I think there's, I think people come together to, what is it? I think there was a chemistry that we had that allowed us to achieve this, even though at times it was very difficult. At times, I know I have wanted to walk away. I know at times they probably wanted to walk away, but I think, to be honest, is just like, whatever it was, like our chemistry, but also the intervention of our ancestors allowed us to, for this, victory to happen. And they sort of made a public statement, and I only share this because they made a public statement on their Instagram, but they are also stepping away from IJP. So there's also a transition that's also happening. And so, I really wish them the best in their endeavors, because I think the work that they have given to the movement the work that they have done on behalf of intersex people has been exemplary.
And one thing I will say is like Pigeon is a very charismatic, inspiring, amazing person to be around. And they have, again, like acknowledging their generosity and everything they've given to supporting other intersex people and young people. And like we showed that with Ori in the film and the connection to Ori's family and the way that they've kind of inspired other younger generations of activists. And like that also Pigeon deserves the ease and the time, you know, like that being a public figure and being on social media and being so putting yourself out there so much is exhausting, and they deserve comfort and ease and privacy. And they are writing a memoir. So they're still going to tell their story. But I think, again, like things like a film and a book, it's like it's a way to do it and to control the narrative and to put it out there, but also without constantly rehearsing it. So I'm excited for them for that opportunity. And also to say that Pigeon like will always call attention to all of their collaborators and all of the people that they work with and collaborate with. And that was another incredible thing that we got to experience as the filmmakers working with Pigeon is all of the people that they're working with. And that's another thing like we couldn't possibly show in such a short film. And one of the things that we were hoping for in the larger documentary project was to show just like the broader movement and how it is intergenerational and how it is so intersectional and how it is so collaborative. And again, like Chicago as the nexus of all this incredible organizing and activism, and why Chicago became the hub for this, because it is connecting with so many different artists and activists and organizers working on different issues who are supporting and lifting this up.
I'll just say, as like an official old who has been doing various sorts of advocacy for a while and having done, you know, queer advocacy, well, before people were readopting the term queer, I you know, that there was the bisexual rights movement, you know, trans advocacy, there's intersex advocacy, and participating in various different sorts of advocacy in the sex, gender, and sexual minorities community, which is a community in which people are only a member of it once they come out, and it's not something that's like intrinsically visible to other people or that was identified for many of them until they did that. That when advocacy movements are growing, there's a time in which people have to adjust and become generous with their podium, because initially in many of these communities it starts out small, and there's a person in each area. There's like the person in whatever upstate New York who is the whatever it is, the speaker, or the intersex speaker, or the bisexual advocate, and that's like where they make their reputation and they have their little space, and you can't succeed as a movement if you're going to stay small like that. You've got to expand and involve all these other people, and you can't keep like being the one person.
Right.
And it's super important, especially what Seife was talking about also, about how Black folks and people of color and other marginalized folks wind up, you know, not being often that person on that podium.
Right.
And having to make the space to grow a movement and to make it inclusive and all of that. And that requires generosity on the part of people who have been leaders too. And, you know, I appreciate when people have that generosity.
That is some real talk, Carrie. I cannot say that enough. Like, I think leaders have to be committed to legacy building, you know, and legacy building for me includes like nurturing leaders who will come up, you know, because I think especially in the US, which is like a capitalist society, which is focused on individualism, like I think we, especially now that we live in this intense celebrity culture, like it encourages us to kind of build these little mini empires. And that does not move us toward liberation, you know?
Liberation is not about building a brand.
Right. It's not, you know, like I think it's really about like really leaving seeds for the next generation who may be like, fuck them seeds, or they may be like, yo, we can take this and grow something else. But I do think like we especially the older folks, like, because I'm old, I'm 41, I'm getting up there, but it's just like, for me, like really nurturing the generation who comes after me, because I won't be able to do this work forever, you know. And I feel like we need more people on the front lines. I can't agree with you more, Carrie.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that, Seifa.
Yeah.
Shauna, I didn't really get to ask you about like how you feel the film has been received. You know, as a person. You know.
Oh yeah, it's been received very positively, I would say, overall. You know, and I think it is doing what we hoped it would do. Again, like I hope that people use it as just like a starting point for dialogue, and to learn more. Like definitely not like, again, we see this as an introduction or a tool and a piece of something, not like a definitive statement. I would say, like, you know, we still have so much more of the footage actually documenting those 3 years of protests and other actions and other people and more interviews and more things that we would like to be able to edit together and put out there. So I would say, you know, I feel like this piece has been doing what we wanted it to do, other than we were hoping that it would be a springboard into the larger project that would let us spiral off into, you know, a more complex picture of this activism.
So I guess I will also ask you both, I mean, just since we're turn taking us. So Seifa, what do you feel like? What's next for you in that advocacy struggle?
Yeah, I think for me personally, I am, so, you know, this next year, like IJP is gonna kind of support the work of other people who want to take up this charge, you know. So there's a group in Nevada that's interested in bringing together a bill. I'm also interested in supporting, you know, holding Lori's feet to the fire, that they actually make good on actually beyond these 6 months to actually protect intersex children. Personally and professionally, I will be going to the United Kingdom. I'm going to be doing a research fellowship. It's the Marie Skłodowska-Curie Fellowship for early stage researchers. It's a 3-year fellowship, specifically focusing on intersex issues. So my advocacy is going to look different. But I think for me, like, part of doing this fellowship is to actually really sort of connect to like the global intersex community and the global intersex activist community, to be part of like, to be more of a global thinker, you know, because even though the US culture is like felt and seen all over the world, it's also a very imperialistic culture. And I feel like I feel like IJP deserves, for the sake of intersex people of color globally, like I want to be part of a global conversation around intersex issues.
And since we've, as a nation, been so good at exporting surgeries around the world,
Right,
in the lives of a whole bunch of other people, it's also good for us who have been here to reach out and try and be part of the repair of that. So I really salute that, Seifa. Good shit.
Thank you.
Shauna, what's next for you?
Well, I mean, right now, I'm just trying to teach during the pandemic and ongoing wildfires now with smoke engulfing our city. So yeah, I'm really focused a lot on just supporting my community right now. And, you know, there's been a lot of protests happening in Portland around racial justice and fighting back against the police here, and supporting a lot of the mutual aid efforts going on here. So I'm more focused on that, I would say, like just being there for my students and my people during this time, and not really thinking that much further than that.
That's totally.
That's so real.
Yeah.
That's so real.
Yep.
Like, and I think we all should be really thinking about climate justice, because the earth will be okay. You know, the earth will replenish itself. We've already seen that. But like, as human beings, we're fragile. We don't want to admit it, but we're totally fragile. Yeah, and Shauna and, you know, Aubrey, who couldn't make it because of the wildfires. So yeah, just sending love to you both, you know?
Absolutely. So I have not gotten any questions from hello folks out there in the world of streaming. Feel free to submit any questions.
I feel like, Carrie, do you have any responses to the film or things you want to say about your involvement and how you felt about seeing yourself portrayed in the film?
You know, so here's something that I think about a fair amount. As somebody who does advocacy work, but is also an educator by profession, so I do get paid to educate. And something that when you're involved in doing advocacy work, a lot of people will point out, you know, they're not being paid to educate other people, and other people should just, you know, go take responsibility for that. I actually am paid to educate people. Now, I don't get to teach a class in intersex issues or something, but I do teach courses that relate to social problems and gender and stuff. And I feel like I work hard to do the job to give people the basic understanding in the courses that they take where that is possible, so that people understand how sex, gender, and sexuality work, and don't get locked up in, you know, there's only this binary, and if you step outside of it, everything explodes and the world ends, and we have to fix it. Mindset, so that they're aware of some facts about, you know, the way the nature of sex works and the way that people's identities work. And so that's something I do. I don't get to see myself do it though, because I'm excited when I'm doing it. So it was interesting to have some, you know, a little of that be in the film and step outside myself and see it. And actually, while that is cool and I'm glad I could do it, I'm also glad that I exist inside myself and don't sit there outside myself watching myself talk.
I think a really important thing that you pointed out is that even gender and sexuality studies focuses so much on gender and doesn't teach about sex. And that this is actually something that's missing from our curriculum and something very important to address, that not everyone is also capable and qualified to address. So
just getting a little bit of it. But the first, I would say, 15 years of my professional life was spent arguing with people who were feminists, gender studies, about the idea that sex exists and matters and we have to talk about it. And I feel like we've made some progress. Like there's been some change. There's still resistance out there, though, to even just, you know, talk about physical bodies as a thing. As there's, you know, this idea that if we could just ignore it enough, bodies would evaporate and we'd be like able to control our whole lives somehow, fully self-determined. But I am glad that there has been some change. But yeah, Shawn, it completely continues to exist where there you have gender studies and it's only gender and there's no physical body there. And we're all just abstract creatures of the mind.
You know, Carrie, I also just want to just extend so much appreciation just for you as someone who's trans and intersex and who is thinking about these issues in a way that's like really critical and nuanced. And I just have always appreciated everything that you shared, everything that like you've thought about. Like, I think it's just fucking brilliant. And, you know, thank you for that generous offering to the Academy and, you know, to just intersex people and to, non-binary people, gender variant folks. Like, thank you for that offering. Because I think you have definitely been generous yourself,
Like everybody who does this stuff, it's meant like the it has generated more negative outcomes in terms of my professional career. Generated huge positive outcomes in the sense of my feeling like I'm doing something that really matters. So all of us who do this sort of work wind up making sacrifices, and it would be a really nice world where we didn't.
Right? Yeah.
But thank you, Seifa, a lot for that. Was very kind.
No, I mean, you deserve. You deserve. You deserve.
I think there needs to be a documentary just based on your talk about sex has never been binary, because that is an amazing, again, beyond the scope of what we could do in 13 minutes, but incredible history that you have and that you tell.
Thank you. Okay, so since you Seifa brought this up, let's do this. Yeah. What questions would you like to ask each other, or me, or something, or what have we not gotten out there for our audience? You want to get out there?
Wow. I mean,
you go.
I guess. Thank you. I guess my question to you, Carrie, is that what is your vision for intersex advocacy, but for the movement?
So all movements go through a process of maturation, and that's what I really want to see us moving in that direction. Maturation doesn't mean like necessarily that you become all institutionalized and stop doing things and just start talking about stuff. The mature movement is one that's able to get frontline activism just in a coordinated and larger scale. So like, working Luri is an important step in a big chain, for example, and every state has hospitals that are doing this. And being able to coordinate so that you have something that's a national as opposed to a local movement. And that kind of, is able to act on that level. That's where we're moving towards. But the real biggest change, I think, is educate people so that it's parents who are the people who have the right to consent from surgeries, who have the major step to take here. So it's about educating, getting that knowledge out there as a general sort of understood, as opposed to some sort of specialist knowledge. If you go to college and take a class, you can find out people are born intersex. So ordinary human beings, as part of their education in the United States, learn this stuff. And so if they have an intersex kid, they don't like jump out the window on fire, scream. Yeah, I'm an intersex kid. Because people make poor decisions when they're not prepared. They're dealing with something that they didn't even know, how it works, and it's hard to find the resources. And the people we're talking about are all like, oh, it's like queer folks or something. It's not people in your whatever it is, a bunch of middle-aged people, 35-year-olds having babies who are not like out there talking sex, gender, and sexuality a lot. Those people need to know, and when they do know, they want to advocate for their kids. Right? And so that's where I hope we're heading.
Yeah.
I don't know. What do you think, Seifa?
Yeah, I mean, I think we need to expand this conversation around intersex. Because I think for a long time the intersex movement has kind of operated in a silo. And I think there's still a lot of stigma and a lot of shame around being and having intersex variations. And I do feel like not everyone who's intersex needs to be an activist or should be forced to be an activist. I think intersex people should just live happy lives free. And I feel like there are so many people who are being left out of the conversation because of how Intersex has lived in the medical establishment, has lived in the academy, and I definitely envision a world where, like you said, where parents can give birth to an intersex child and be like, I got this kid, kid's different. That's cool, but also that there's just so many people who are a part of this conversation, because I think there are people who have had genital surgery and there are people who haven't, there are people who identify as intersex and there's people who don't, and there are people who do know and people who don't know. Like, I think there's just so much. I think we are still in our infancy, and I feel like people like me, people like you, like Pigeon and Linnell and Jim and David and like all these people who are given so generously are laying the foundation for the people who will, reap this harvest years to come, and so, yeah, I definitely, I think I do feel like our time is coming. I don't know when. But yeah, I and even if we don't make it as humans, I hope that the next species that comes after us, that they'll have a more nuanced way of thinking about sex, or maybe they won't have sex. Maybe they won't have gender, Shit.
Yeah, you heard that the python that just produced 7 eggs after not having been exposed to a male python in 40 years.
Oh, wow.
Genesis.
Anyway, are those viable eggs?
Some of them are, but they don't know if they'll actually make it all the way.
Whoa.
4 of them are developing.
What? That's wild.
I mean, nature is really cool. But it's something that you were saying, Seifer, that I also wanted to bounce off of, is that not only are we a set of people with really diverse experiences in terms of our relationship to intersex, but also just the very idea that there's a dividing line between intersex and endosex is itself part of this whole binary idea.
Totally.
And sex really is a spectrum. And we really do all fall somewhere on there. And something we have to, I hope, get better at is not having fights between people who have been heavily medicalized because they're right in the middle there and they've had so many traumatic experiences.
Right.
People who are, a little intersex.
Totally.
Who are like, hey, this is cool. I think it's really cool that I'm a little intersex.
Right.
Those two groups can wind up, because they're experiencing very different sets of pressures and traumas, fighting with each other when obviously we should all be working together.
Totally.
And avoiding various sorts of lateral violence is like the key part of any struggle to survive, right? Is by not doing the old circular firing squad.
Yo, yeah. Not devouring each other.
Yeah.
Not cannibalizing each other.
Being able to, be generous with one another and accept a diversity of experiences, and also understand that different people experience different traumas than you, and you have to respect those traumas and never present somebody's trauma as something great and special, because that is a really mean thing to do to people. All of those things are not unique to intersex advocacy, but they play out in specific ways for us because of our parents.
Yeah.
All right, now I'm going to be asking for last words.
I know, Shauna, you had a question.
Oh, I was just going to say, my last word can be like that. As you said, like, movements need allies. And so, I think it is important, even if you're a cis white person, to figure out how to use your resources and your power and your privilege in ways that can be of service in movements, and not take up space and co-op space, and be attentive to the individual needs, but like that's messy work that you need to do and keep doing, and not opt out of.
Amen.
Yep.
Say that, Shauna. Say it.
And all of us are always in some ways privileged and marginalized. That's the human experience. And recognizing that and using the privileges that you have to benefit the people who lack those so that they will do the same for you is like the key to success. So,
Come through with the nuance, Carrie. Love to see it. Love to see it.
Thank you so much, Carrie, and thank you, Saifa.
Thank you,
And thanks-
Shauna. Thank you, Carrie.
yes, thank you, everybody.
Thanks for having us. Thanks for watching.
Thank you, audience.
Cool. Thank y'all, whoever y'all are.
Yes.
The 2020 Minority Health Film Festival offers a diverse variety of films and events that we just wouldn't be able to offer in the in-person cinema experience. But I think what really makes it unique is the focus not only on public health issues, but the issues that really concern communities of color. If you're looking for a reason to engage or to try it out, this is the perfect time. Just go to mkefilm.org/MHFF